Welcome back. We are joined now by the Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Virginia Democrat Mark Warner. Senator, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming in. Two things here. We're going to talk about the chat room, and we're going to talk about the raid. Let's talk about the raid first. Are you glad this administration is taking a more aggressive military posture against the Houthis, and do you believe if it is successful, it will reopen commercial shipping through the Red Sea?
I think we should take more affirmative action. I think the administration is doing the right thing. I would rather them do it with more of our allies involved, but the fact that Donald Trump's America First is turning quickly into America Alone. But the basis of going after Houthis in a stronger, tougher way, I agree with.
The administration argues the Biden administration didn't do enough. Do you agree with that?
I think the Biden administration took repeated action against the Houthis. I think they could have done more.
All right. Now, let's get to the chat room. What is your experience? Do you use Signal, for example?
Yes. Signal is safer than your normal cell phone because the Chinese, through Salt Typhoon, have penetrated our traditional cellular networks. Signal is better, but the Chinese, the Russians are trying to go after Signal. They've had some successful efforts. Everyone is warned in the intelligence community, do not use Signal for classified information. It is bright, it is bold, it is cyber and hygiene 101 in terms of how to stay safe.
One of the things discussed in this chat, which the administration has said is accurate, was a reference to a high-value Houthi target at his girlfriend's house somewhere in Yemen, probably Sana'a, near the capital. David Martin, my exceptional colleague here at CBS, has reported that the Israelis are furious about this because they believe those who would read that could sort of backward engineer that and find something out that they shouldn't find out. Do you agree with that? What do you think the implications of that are?
I have not seen any of the classified information about this, so I'm basing my knowledge on open source. If the Israelis are this mad, and I think they got a right to be this mad, about classified information being treated sloppily, and this is a pattern. We've seen them expose CIA agents in the first 2 weeks. We've seen the Doge boys print the full budget and headcounts of a classified agency. So this is not a one-off. And what happens if the Israelis are this mad and the Five Eye partners, our key allies, are upset? Will they continue to share information with us if it's treated this sloppily? And if we don't see action taken by this administration, if someone is not held accountable, I believe Secretary Hegseth should resign or be fired. I think Mike Waltz should resign or be fired. If no action is taken, what message does that send to the workforce? Because, Major, I can tell you this. If you were a military officer or a CIA agent and you treated classified information this way, you would be fired. End of story.
When Republicans say it was a mistake and they'll never make it again, does that satisfy you?
Baloney. I'd use stronger language for Sunday morning, but it's like, this is a pattern of sloppiness. I mean, think about the Doge boys when they print all the savings and half of the information just factually wrong. This administration does not treat classified information the appropriate way. Major, we've not even seen if the phones that were used, have they been collected? Have they been checked to make sure the bad guys didn't put malware in them? That, again, would be the first action of a serious administration. I've asked the FBI director whether he's launching an investigation. I've heard nothing back from him.
Does it give you any comfort that the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, Republican, and the Democrat, Jack Reed, have called for an inspector general investigation, and is that enough?
I'm glad there's that bipartisan effort. I hope there will be additional ones. I hope, frankly, I think the Department of Justice needs to look at whether laws have been broken. Because, again, put this in context. The Director of National Intelligence, I think 12, 13 days ago, boldly tweeted out, anybody that leaks information should be pursued to the full extent of the law. Well, if Tulsi Gabbard believes that, is that just for others? Or does that standard apply to her as well, where she, frankly, in our hearing, one, refused to acknowledge she was even on the call to start with, wouldn't tell us if her phone was hers or the government, and then at least initially said there was no classified information at all. when clearly, if you've got this kind of information about time of an attack, that's classified. And one of the things I'd love her or Hegseth to do is go down to the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. I was there yesterday for a couple town halls. The aircraft carrier Truman is home ported in Norfolk. I was talking yesterday with friends and family of members who are on the Truman. Their anger level was so high because if that information had gotten out and the Houthis had been able to redirect their defensive tools, very likely we would have had American life lost. That could have been prevented if you just treat classified information appropriately.
Talk about something else that is of deep concern to you because you wrote the law. Oracle appears to be in deep talks with the administration about some method of acquiring TikTok before the April 5th deadline. It's not clear whether or not China would retain ownership of the ever-important algorithm within TikTok. What do you know? What are your concerns? What's going to happen?
What I know is I believe there are 4 bidders. I don't know all of the bidders, but I can tell you this. If there is a result, no matter how much kind of Trump publicity around this, that suddenly we've got a new owner. If we've got a result and the algorithm resides in Beijing, it is all a sham, because the ability to manipulate that algorithm to what we see on that TikTok channel, and again, remember, China doesn't offer TikTok to their own young people. They're getting, we get the crack version, and where you can manipulate information, you can put Chinese propaganda out, and if that algorithm does not move for whatever transfer, then the whole thing's a sham.
And it violates the law.
And it violates the law. And the irony of this, Major, it was Donald Trump in his first administration that first pointed out the problems with TikTok. Candidly, I didn't fully agree until I did my own research. I go, holy heck, collecting data and this power of a propaganda tool, it should not be available to Americans. 80% of the Congress, both parties agree.
Senator Warner, stay right there. We'll have more questions for you. And for you at home, please stay with us. We'll be right back. The death toll in Myanmar has exceeded 1,600 since that massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit Friday. Rescue teams are digging through rubble in Myanmar and Thailand and, in some cases, finding survivors from underneath. The area is still feeling the effects of huge aftershocks this weekend. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We return to our conversation with Senator Mark Warner, Democrat, Virginia, Vice Chair of the Intelligence Committee. So, the Intelligence Committee released its National Threat Assessment Tuesday. Among the things it said was China is going after Greenland's natural resources, saying China, will use the same access as a key strategic foothold for advancing China's broader and economic aims in the Arctic. The Vice President was there with his wife a couple of days ago. President Trump recently said 100% America will get Greenland and did not rule out, if necessary, the possible use of military force in America to do that. Is Greenland a legitimate strategic issue? Point one. Point two, how is this administration pursuing that legitimate interest, if there is one?
Point one, Greenland has got a lot of rare earth minerals and has enormous value, just as many other places around the world do. So, legitimate interest and stronger ties with Greenland? Absolutely. The idea that we are going to threaten a military invasion against a population that, at least everything I've read, overwhelmingly, the people in Greenland don't want to become part of America. Going against Denmark, who is a NATO member who rules Greenland currently, this whole approach that Trump has of treating our allies, we turned Canada into a enemy, our allies as not allies, and suddenly wanting to buddy up with Putin in Russia or with Xi and China. Think about it. America 3 weeks ago, voted with Russia, North Korea, I think it was Belarus, against everyone else who was a democracy because we wouldn't acknowledge that Putin started the war in Ukraine. This is a crazy foreign policy, and America is stronger when we have allies. America alone is weaker if we don't have that intelligence sharing, if we don't have these mutual defense pacts.
That national threat assessment also had a notable shift, saying that the biggest threat to America was drug cartels, gangs, fentanyl, Islamic terrorists, not Russia and China. Do you agree?
I think the threat of drugs is awful, and we need to do more against fentanyl. I think the long-term strategic technology competition with China is the issue, not just of today, but the next 30 years. It's AI, it's quantum, it's a whole series of biotech as well. On the question of Russia, here's the remarkable thing. The intelligence assessment said Russia's still an enemy and said Russia is still going to do malign election interference. In that document, they say that at the very same time, the Trump administration is getting rid of the election threat group inside our intelligence community. That is a complete contradiction.
Very quickly, this threat assessment does not mention climate change. It was there in the previous Trump administration and the Biden administration. Your reaction?
Denial of science doesn't mean that it's not happening. One of the reasons why Greenland and the Arctic, because we've had so much ice melt, there are a whole suddenly set of new shipping lanes. You can't deny what is happening. Call it sea level rise, call it whatever you want. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars raising the piers each year in Norfolk because of sea level rise. You can't ignore what's happening.
Democratic Senator Mark Warner, Virginia, Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Major.
And we'll be right back. We turn now to the Republican chairman of the House Budget Committee, Texas Congressman Jody Arrington, who joins us this morning from New Orleans. Mr. Chairman, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. In the last month, the Dow has lost 5.14% of its value, the NASDAQ 8%, the S&P 6.2%. Consumer confidence, as you probably are aware, has dipped a bit in the last couple of months. How do you account for all of this?
Well, good morning to you, Major. First of all, core inflation's down, mortgage rates are down just a little bit, food and gas prices are down. So you're going to have fluctuations in the financial markets, but we're seeing that the fundamentals are already having an impact on the cost of living, which I think should be job number one of this president. But you've got the tariffs, which I think are critical for our long-term prosperity, to have that reset, have that fair and reciprocal trade dynamic that doesn't exist today. So transitioning from the last 4 years to a new administration with a new economic policy agenda is going to have some adjustments that go with it. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to have better prospects for growth. You're going to bring down the prices, and you're going to have better prospects for our future, including reducing the debt to GDP, which, as the budget chairman, I can tell you, is completely unsustainable at this point and could bankrupt our country.
Mr. Chairman, one of the top tariff advisors to the president, Peter Navarro, said this morning that tariffs are tax cuts. Are they?
Well, in the long run, I think having an unfair trade dynamic at the current point is suppressing growth. It's suppressing wages and suppressing job creation. So it has an adverse impact on our economy. There's no way, Major, to reset the trade dynamic that we've allowed to persist in an unfair way for so long without some disruption. The president's been very transparent about it. And he deployed the same tactics now back in his first administration successfully. We brought China and others to the table. We had a reset. We had new purchase agreements. We had structural reforms, and we benefited. We had better trade activity. We had better economic activity. And overall, wages grew, and life in the American economy and the quality of life for our fellow Americans was better. So that transition has to happen. And the only person I've seen in my life and experience in politics with the political courage to do it has been President Trump, and I support him 100%.
When you think about the budget and the process by which to finance tax cuts, either the existing ones or new ones, you're going to count on tariff revenue, are you not?
Well, I think we should count on reducing spending that is runaway bankrupting levels of spending at $2 trillion in annual deficits that will double in the next 10 years. Half of that $2 trillion is interest on the debt. That will more than double in the next 10 years. So we have a spending problem. That deficit spending is driving World War levels of debt and will bankrupt the country. So I think we should offset the tax cuts with spending reductions and bend that debt to GDP. The revenue from tariffs could do two things: accelerate the reduction of deficit to GDP and do what the president has said he wants to happen in this America First agenda, put our nation on a path to balance. But it can also provide tariff relief like he did in the first administration for farmers in West Texas, for example, with the market facilitation payments that took the sting out of the fallout from the early stages of the trade battles before we had the reset for reciprocal trade. So I think those are better uses of tariff revenue, but I think we've got to bring down spending. If we don't, then I don't know how much longer we have before, as Ray Dalio says, we're going to have an economic heart attack, and it will undermine everything.
Let's talk about spending for a second. As you know, Mr. Chairman, Medicaid is projected to increase 5.2% each year for the next 10 years. House Republicans have voted for $880 billion in cuts over 10 years. You and I both know, you don't have to argue with me about it, that it would be a reduction in the future growth, not a pure cut. But if you lose a service as a Medicaid recipient, that's probably a distinction without a difference. Can you say that when this all gets done, alterations to Medicaid will not change the way people access that program and the health services they receive from it?
Major, I'll do better. I think if we don't make these changes, this program and the federal budget in general is not sustainable, because we're allowing states and local organizations to siphon hundreds of billions of dollars away from the Medicaid beneficiary in the Medicaid program. We also, this is the one means tested program that doesn't have work requirements for able-bodied adults. We also have a Medicaid program because of the Obamacare expansion and the expansion population of able-bodied adults, where the federal government provides 90 cents on every dollar match for that population, but the preponderance of Medicaid beneficiaries, the blind, the disabled, the poor, the sickest among our fellow citizens, get about 60 to 65%. So all of the healthcare system is oriented around the 90%, the able-bodied adults, and they're not providing the same access, which is to the traditional Medicaid, which is why the outcomes are going down. So there is a lot of ways to reorient the system, to make it more efficient, to root out waste and fraud. And it's well over the $800 billion. It's common sense, straightforward, and you don't have to touch a dime of the benefits.
Mr. Chairman, very quickly, the president told NBC, quote, he couldn't care less if foreign automakers raise prices. Do you care?
What I care about is that our workers and manufacturers in this country are competing head-to-head with China and every other competitor country, that we allow their products to come into our markets open and free, and they don't. They tax our products, and it's hurting our workers. It's hurting our economic output, and we need a reset. And so there's no way to get to that dynamic, that reciprocal trade arrangement, without the tough negotiation tactics of President Trump. He was successful in the first term. We didn't create economic chaos. We didn't even have much of inflation. In fact, the economy was roaring. We had more jobs, more people out of poverty. That's what's going to happen. And I support the president, and he has to prove that he is committed to this. And I believe he is. And I think that's important if we're going to get to the other side of this.
House Budget Committee Chairman Jody Arrington of Texas. Thanks very much, sir. I appreciate it. And we'll be right back. We want to go back to the situation surrounding the administration and the officials' use of Signal, a messaging app, to discuss military attack plans. In our new CBS News poll, let's see, 3/4 of Americans say that this was, to them, a serious matter. A total of 76% of Americans also said the use of the app to discuss military plans was, to their way of thinking, not appropriate. And that included 8 in 10 independents, and more than half of Republicans surveyed. We turn now to Sue Gordon, who served as Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence during the first Trump administration. She is in Austin. And retired Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie, former head of U.S. Central Command. This marks his first official appearance as a CBS News contributor, and he joins us from Tampa, Florida. Good morning to you both. Sue, I want to start with you. Just break this down for our audience. How much of this falls into anything that you would, through your career, understand to be acceptable communications about sensitive or classified information?
Well, good morning, Major. Just top line, without getting into classification guides, there is nothing about the information that has to do with operations that is appropriate for this communications channel. None. And there are other communications channels that are available for this type of thing, and the risk of loss that comes with uncontrolled communications is profound. So I don't think we need to argue at any level whether it was appropriate for this path. Now, we can talk about how that happened, we can talk about what they could have done, and we can talk about what we do next, but on the top line, this isn't what you discuss in those channels.
So when the administration, Sue, says, but nothing bad happened, nobody got to it, so don't worry about it, how do you react to that?
Well, one, I'm glad the operation was successful. Yay. But we have a saying that says that every success is a failure where something went right. And I don't think we should rest on the fact that nothing bad happened this time. We don't know whether that communications path has been penetrated, so we don't know whether state actors that have lots of resources are just sitting and lurking now, knowing that we do important things on that. Certainly the information that has now come out for any intelligence officer, and I can speak of this with great expertise, that's all super useful for the next time, or for understanding the sources, or understanding how we did the targeting, or understanding how we operate, or what our operational tempo is. So all of that information is valuable. So I'm glad the operation was successful. Now we need to deal with the fact that this should not have happened. There is consequence when it does, and you can't be sure that there is no persistent risk that follows it.
Frank, this story has forests and trees. I don't want to lose the forest. The bigger issue here is a new tempo, an increased tempo of military operations, some of them day in out, against the Houthis in Yemen. Evaluate that and its importance in understanding the broader context of this story.
Sure, Major, and first of all, it's great to be with you here today. I think the larger story here is actually that we have finally begun to strike the Houthis hard. There's an old Neil Young song, I'll lift a line from it, should have been done long ago. Well, now we're beginning to do it, and we're beginning to strike effectively at a pace, a scope, and a tempo that frankly eluded the last administration. And I would argue that we're doing it because for the first time, we have the political will to employ appropriate military capability against the Houthis. And we want one of two things from the Houthis. We want them either to be deterred from attacking ships that pass through the Bab el-Mandeb, which really means the Suez Canal. That's one condition. The other condition would be if they won't stop, we want to remove their capability to do it. The second task would be harder. It is within our capability. It will not be a short action. It won't be what we'd call a single period of darkness. These attacks will have to continue. They may grow in scope and scale. They're certainly not endless in time, and we need to fix the problem and move on to other things. I think the fact that we have a second aircraft carrier that's moving to CENTCOM is certainly a sign that this administration is very serious about this requirement. The fact we're moving B-2s into the region similarly signals that. But I believe, again, for the first time, we're coupling genuine political will to act along with military capability. So it's a unique moment in the theater, and I'm glad to see that this administration is grasping that opportunity.
Frank, the terminology you just used, deter and degrade, can that be done from a distance, meaning aerial and from shipborne armaments?
So I think we can do a very good job of that. I wouldn't take anything off the table. Again, when you take things off the table, it tends to give aid and comfort to the enemy. We've done too much of that. I think we should leave everything on the table, and I would also leave on the table actions against Tehran itself. All paths in this matter lead back to Tehran. And we need to know and understand that. They're the principal supplier for the Houthis. And right now, Iran is finding it convenient to backpedal and to claim that close relationship. But in fact, the Houthis exist because of Iranian support, and now to a lesser degree because of Russian support. And we need to recognize that, and we shouldn't give Iran a free ride on this. And I think we have the capability actually right now in Iran's weakened state to threaten them very strongly. And I'll just say one more thing as I close out on this, Major. The first Trump administration did 3 things that put them in a unique place right now in the region. Number one, that administration struck and killed Qasem Soleimani. That's forgotten in the United States. That's not forgotten in Iran. It displayed American will at a level that has generally been absent in the region. Second thing is the signing of the Abraham Accords, which gave Israel the opportunity to enter the region diplomatically, economically, and to a degree culturally. It's going to be a rough road, but I think that's only going to expand. And last, movement of Israel from the European command into the Central Command has actually enabled the very successful defense of Israel that we've seen over the last few weeks and months, and is a huge step forward. All of these taken together give this administration a unique opportunity right now and in the months ahead to shape events in the region.
So I want to go back to you because Senator Warner on this program just a few moments ago said he's concerned that those in the Five Eyes community, meaning our top intelligence sharing allies, will look at this situation, whether it's prosecuted or not, they don't care, as careless, as reckless, and they might be legitimately encouraged, therefore, to pull back. Working in the Trump administration the first time around, you worked with our partners there. You know what their sentiments are. Do you share those concerns?
They may express those concerns.
I think
I would argue.
Frank, this is for Sue. Frank, this is for Sue.
I'm sorry. Sue, please go ahead.
Well, General, anything you have to say is worthwhile, but let me take a run at this. Listen, we count on our allies and partners, and protecting their equities and interests and their sources of information is really important. There have been historically errors in the past. It's not limited to this one, where you find that one partner or another has been unable to protect a partner's information. I think what's difficult about this one is 2 things that the administration does need to address. One is you really do need to tighten down on how you communicate, because my suspicion is that they were just doing something expedient. And I wish someone on the call had said, hold on, if we're going to go down this path, we need to go to a different channel. But the second thing is the way we're reacting to it when we suggest that there was nothing to see here. I think that's actually the thing that more needs to be addressed with our partners and allies, to say, yeah, we understand that this was not what we should or would have preferred to do. And so to rebuild trust that way. So it's not that there's not error. The issue is, are you doing things that inspire confidence? And I think that we know that just from an environmental perspective, our relationships with our allies and partners are a little bit tenuous at best. So creating something that causes them to wonder whether we're trustworthy, again, to me, has a huge impact on our ability to advance the things that we want to do.
Frank, you're a CBS contributor. I'm going to give you a 1-minute time warning on this. Close out with your thoughts about this issue with the Signal chat.
So I think Sue was spot on in her analysis. I would simply argue that I believe the United States remains the indispensable nation in a lot of places. And I think, I'm sure we'll learn from this. I would like to think that it won't be repeated. But I think, again, it's unfortunate that the Signal chat has really sort of obscured the very good, very real work that's been done in finally addressing a problem that's dragged on far too long, which is Houthi action in the Bab el-Mandeb to close to effectively close the Suez Canal.
And real quick, Frank, when you looked at this, did it shock you? I mean, like, what? You're talking about that there?
I was surprised.
That's it. You're learning the whole TV thing. Frank McKenzie and Sue Gordon, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it for your time, your expertise, and pulling this all out for the audience. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Margaret will be back next week. I'm Major Garrett, and you can join me for our daily political show, America Decides, on CBS News 24/7 at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And you can find it on your Paramount Plus and CBS News app.